This is Brad A. Milford with the Unlimited Business Wisdom Podcast, where leaders, seasoned entrepreneurs, and business owners share their wisdom. It's straight to the point to respect people's time, and because we know knowledge and wisdom turn to business possibility, and possibility mixed with support and action become reality. In this podcast, we discuss leadership, sales, marketing, operations, team development, quality, and finance to drive sustainable results and everlasting impact to make the world a better place. Thanks for joining us. Miriam, I'm so excited to have you on the show.
I think I'm more excited.
Welcome to the Unlimited Wisdom Business Podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. And thanks to everybody who's listening. Thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time out, learning, inputting some new perspective. That's a wonderful way to move through the world.
I love that. Hang with us because we're going to dive deep. So just hang with us for a few moments. And here we go. Miriam, I love your energy already. So, anybody listening and watching, you can imagine we have a short conversation before the podcast starts. And I got to say, Miriam's bringing a lot of energy. And so I'm excited to have you here. So great conversation already. Miriam, for the people listening and watching, would you be willing to share with us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I am someone who I believe I have two life purposes. I have one is to enjoy the experience of being alive as much as I possibly can. And the other is to have as large of a positive impact as I possibly can. And so I work really hard at both. And sometimes they're in odds with one another, but I find the more that I work at it, the more congruent the pursuit of each is of the other. And so how that translates into my work is I'm an executive coach and facilitator. So my background's business, psychology, organizational and management development, leadership and transformational coaching. And what I love to do is work with individuals and teams who are going through moments of transformation and help them figure out how to stay sane and effective in the midst of usually what is an inflection point, either that they're of their own design or based on market conditions that are kind of throwing them into a growth curve.
I love all that.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the question. Can you say all that 5 times and say it once backwards?
Oh, the backwards part. I don't know how to say one single word backwards. Do you?
I'm sorry. Just kidding.
I'm like about it. I like challenges, but I'm like, I don't know how to say anything backwards.
That was so great. But you threw a lot into that. So there's some depth in your answer. So I love that. We're going to dive in here just a little bit more. Miriam, fantastic. Well done. With somebody with your experience, I know that's challenging to get that statement in there. Hence, that's the reason why I asked the question the way I did.
Yeah.
So thank you for what you delivered. Moving to the question 2, which I love to ask, right, is what's the best thing for you about being in business?
I think of every business as an experiment, and I'm someone who's naturally curious. I think businesses, if we take these core competencies and these market conditions, what's the most we can do with this? And it's a constant experiment. And I love that. I love surprises. I love challenges. I love strategy. And so for me, that especially if we can create success in a way that is unexpected for ourselves or some other stakeholders, that's a win. That's fun.
Love all that. So for the stakeholders, of course, who doesn't love that, right?
Yeah.
But you said, what's the most that we can do with all this? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I mean, that's a really simple but yet powerful question. What's the most? What's the best? What's the most we can do with this? That's powerful stuff right there. Love that.
What's the maximum potential based on these ingredients? And let's answer that honestly. Sometimes people are exceedingly ambitious, despite evidence to the contrary. And so I'm a fan of honesty in that process.
Let's celebrate that, everybody. Everybody listening and watching. Come on, they're like, me too.
Yeah.
Everybody else. Well, maybe not everybody. Let's not include everybody in that. Most people, I think, like honesty. Sometimes honesty can be hard, pretty tough, right? Challenge. And in leadership, we talk about that a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we shift, do you have any thoughts about that? You want to toss something out there from your experience?
I think that honesty is hard when we don't start with being honest with ourselves. And so I really believe we all need to become students of ourselves, especially if we're in leadership positions or aspire to be. We need to become what I consider like superhuman level of self-awareness. I think what we expect to be kind of a human level of self-awareness is when we're setting the bar really, really low of what that looks like kind of on average across the globe. So I want a way of just kind of shifting that or challenging it is to think superhuman, like what's above what I would expect of others or I would expect of myself. And that's what I'm going to start to aim for. And once we have that rigorous honesty, it becomes easier and easier and easier to have that with others.
Love that. I mean, truly, from the bottom of my heart, I love that. Awareness is used, that word just is used a lot nowadays, right? It's become more mainstream and people talk about it. But the levels of awareness, what I hear in what you're saying is you're talking about there's degrees of awareness or there's levels of awareness. I mean, that's my interpretation of what I heard you say. And I love that because I've found that to be true in my own life. As I get to know myself, I get to know more people better as I learn about me and how I function, right? And so I think that's fantastic. You just highlighting the fact that there are levels there. Would you turn the mic back to you? You have something to share on that?
Yes, I agree. I agree.
That's great. Miriam, I love this so far. Shifting gears to another question. This is really my favorite question. So I think I share with you, I'm more of a like operational integrator. It's just part of who I am. Speaking of like how we get to know one another, we get to know ourselves in the mirror and all that. So we hear from other business owners, they're getting so much business that sometimes what comes with that is a little bit of overwhelm or sometimes a lot of overwhelm or like chaos or these, pressure type feelings. Would you be willing to share your thoughts from your vast experience level?
Yeah, I know this firsthand, and I know this from working with a lot of people in leadership positions. So I believe that state of overwhelm can and should be temporary. And embedded in your question is, you said something around chaos. And I think usually that is the cause of the overwhelm, that or what we call imposter syndrome. To me, the imposter syndrome is the gap between my perceived capability and my perceived expectations, or the expectations I perceive of myself. So the extent to which I don't feel well equipped to deliver on what I think is expected of me, that creates a lot of anxiety, which creates overwhelm, which leads to chaos, and so on. But I think almost always we can pause and we can zoom out and we can get into a planning state and we can get organized, we can feel prepared, we can actually do a reality check of our capacity or capability, because it's often higher than we're giving ourselves credit for. We can get a reality check on expectations and align with those that are around us. Often we are expecting more of ourselves than others are expecting of us. So the more we're closing that gap, the easier it is for us just to trust ourselves and start to get into motion. I think most people, out of lack of kind of discipline to pause in moments of overwhelm, they get really busy executing, and they're creating more swirl for themselves, and they're just pushing down the road the need to zoom out and get organized. And often we actually misinterpret the need to continue to move. We forget that it's okay to get off the treadmill for a moment and catch our breath. And that actually, once we do, there's more time, there's more space, we feel more capable and we feel more prepared, and everything's becomes a bit more simple. It might not still be easy, but I'm a big fan of making things as simple as they can be.
I'm just taking all that in. That was fantastic. I mean that sincerely.
Yeah.
So you had a lot rolled into that, and I love how you delivered that in a very systematic way. So probably anybody listening or watching for length has heard me say structure creates freedom, and so it's this thing that I talk about a lot. And so I hear some of that embedded in what you're suggesting. But what I love about what you said
is that by doing that, and you use the word discipline, by doing that, you create more opportunity, more freedom, more flow, more time for thinking, more comfort by doing all that. Is that what you were saying, or are you saying something different?
That's exactly it. Yes, I also believe that. Yeah, so that structure does create freedom, and if we're feeling like we're flailing, it's probably because we're lacking a sense of structure, or we've outgrown the structure, and it's time to reevaluate and rebuild.
Love all that. So if you're feeling chaos, look toward the fundamentals, reevaluate, restructure. This is what
Yes.
I hear you say. Love that.
Yeah.
Heed her advice. I love it, Miriam. I love it.
Yeah, because honestly, if we do that, I know I'm interrupting you, but one last thought on this. Once we do that, we can go back to enjoying it. I mean, the waves of growth or abundance of business, isn't that why we got into this to begin with? We freak out so much about the scarcity and the moments of pause in between those waves. And then we freak out when they come. And so nowhere along the entrepreneurial journey are we just celebrating and enjoying ourselves. And as much as possible, I mean, you probably got this from what I shared at the beginning, but I just would rather enjoy all of the different parts as much as possible. So it can be a blast. Like when we look back on our lives, I hope we can just celebrate in awe of those moments that we made it through, even if it was hard. And I like to have preemptive nostalgia of just like, oh my gosh, these are the days. These are the days I'm going to look back on and remember. And we can gain perspective once we have that structure in place.
I love what you're sharing here. And it's such an important topic in the, I don't want to do air quotes, but metaphorically, like in the busy world that we live in today, these are regular moments where people are overwhelmed. There's a lot to take in. There's all these things, right? No matter what position you're in, or you're a tier 1 position or tier 12, or if you reverse that, or however, wherever you are, life is pretty busy right now, right? And so how we take all this in, and how often we pause and really celebrate. What I heard you say is not just the wins, which is great. That's good in of itself. Like, hey, let's celebrate some wins along the way. We did this right? We did this more effective. But also some of the challenges. Let's celebrate some of the challenges too, is what I heard in what you were saying.
Yeah.
And so let's celebrate all of it, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. I love that.
Why not?
This is great. Great. And I think that's not difficult to make actionable too, right? So if we were to take what we said and we were just implementing it into a system, hey, once a month, set myself a reminder, or, in whatever project management system you are, working in, or however that works for you, make some periodic check-ins to say, hey, what challenges can I celebrate that we're going to push through, and what challenges, or what things have we resolved, right? That we can celebrate as well. So I love that.
Building in a cadence of just those retros of pause, and I love it.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Miriam, thank you for that. So if you're listening and you're watching, tap in here, because we're going to dive in a little bit more. Miriam's got some great
ominous
advice.
Oh boy, here we go.
Miriam, so who else, this question is so fun. Who else, this is like pay it forward question, right? So who else successful like yourself, of course, ought to be on the Unlimited Wisdom podcast?
Yeah. Okay. So rather than name names, I'm going to give you a category of folks, and I'm hoping people listening will identify as that and then reach out to you and say, I want to be on the podcast.
Love that thinking.
Who knows if that's possible, but I bet there's a lot of people listening who are deserving of the airtime. I want to demystify successful exits. So I want people to come on the podcast who felt like they had here's my air quote unquote, successful exit, or quote unquote failure in closing their business. And I feel like most of the time, what we think is success, what we're aiming for, how we're measuring ourselves, is not realistic. I know a lot of people who have sold their businesses, who have IPO'd, who have whatever milestone we hold in reverence, and they went through it and they felt regret and they felt frustration, and maybe they overly diluted along the way. And so there wasn't this financial windfall that it appeared to be when we're reading the headlines. or maybe there's people who close their business and that was the best decision they ever made. And so I want to just really emphasize that it's the journey. And so we need to maybe, yes, have a vision and yes, aim for that, but be honest about what's the best we can do with these conditions and call it when it's no longer good. So if you're listening and you feel like you had a success story that didn't feel like a success, or if you're listening and you feel like you had a failure, but it didn't feel like a failure, reach out to Brad because we want to hear from you.
That was one of the best answers I've ever had, Miriam.
Oh, wow.
What I love about that is you took a question. So, you listened to a couple podcasts. You took a question that is a question that I ask everyone, and you shared a totally different perspective. You put a spin on that question in order to deliver something very specific. And I want to celebrate you for that. This is what makes a good leadership person like yourself, like in this space, because when we can take something and sort of look at it from a different perspective, right? And then share perspectives and make it something different, like that synergy. I want to celebrate you for that. So,
woo, all right, I'll take it. Let's go.
Thank you. I love it. And I challenge you, if you're listening and watching and you're saying that's me, well, then do what Miriam said.
Reach out. We want to hear from you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. Right. Let's get to the crux of this. Just really dive deep into something, right? So in all your vast experience and the things you're working on now and the things you worked on before and all of that, what's one piece of advice? And I know this is challenging, right? But what's one piece of advice that you would share with other business owners?
I'm going to build on this idea of becoming students of ourselves and having superhuman levels of awareness. I am convinced that I was going to say everybody. I don't like to speak in absolutes, but it's like, just to make the point, almost every leader I've ever interacted with minimizes the impact they are having on others. And so therefore they are missing out on one of the greatest points of leverage they have in influencing performance for people in their orbit. And so what I mean by that is I literally want everybody in this moment to think, what is the impact I want to be known for? So when people describe me and working with me, do I want to be known as inspiring? Do I want to be known as driving results? There's no wrong answer, but if you don't have an answer, you're missing out on your ability to drive that impact. So answer that question for yourself. Then I would really encourage people to start to notice when their impact is different than their intention, and to be able to start to close the gap. And so that will fuel their self-awareness and their situational awareness. And I find that we are much stronger at being able to kind of bring people along when we start to pay attention or attune to those kinds of things. And I know you are modeling that. You are an example of that. And you said, before we started recording, you said, here's my intention. And at the end, I'm going to ask you, did I hold up my bargain? And I was like, what? Let's copy paste that mindset into every leader around the world, because it's very rare and it's very powerful. And it seems simple, but it is very, very powerful.
You're making my heart smile. Not only because you shared that about me and that I am intentional about that, but because of what you just delivered. So powerful, so simple, right? Simple, not easy, you said earlier, but and simple, actionable right now. So as you were saying that, and I'm hoping if you're listening and watching, those of you who are listening and watching, you did the same thing I did, which was picture in the mind's eye what she was describing, right? So how do I want to be known? What kind of leader, what do I want to be known for? Who do I want to be, right? That's what was running through my mind as you were speaking. And I had an answer in my mind, and I don't want to say something out loud because I want the people listening and watching to do the same. I want them to have their own answer, right? So I don't want to place anything there. And so you likely had an answer, and now you can take that answer and double down on it. So if you know the answer to that, now you can say I'm going to circle back to what you were saying before. How can I make the most of this? Right? What can I do to make the most of this thing that I want to be known for? And list 3, 4, 5 things down, and then begin to double down on those. and let all that other stuff go. So Miriam, I know you specialize in this, but I love what you're sharing here. And this is fantastic. Very simple, easy to put into place, things that you listening and watching can do today. And that's the kind of stuff that this audience loves. So thank you.
Great. So glad.
Well, I'm going to go one step farther because I know you have something else. And I know I didn't prep you for this, but what's one other thing that you would share with other business owners that is really powerful, that maybe something that just keeps coming up over and over again for you and the clients that you work with? Would you be willing to share one more?
Yes, especially for people who want to grow. Either they want upward mobility or they want to see their businesses grow. And I do think we need a reality check as a society, and like growth's for growth's sake does not set us up. We're not better for having more zeros or whatever. So if we want to grow because it's fun, it's the experiment of it. It's like, I feel like we can, I feel like I want to. Those are great roots to drive us, or great orientation for us to have as we're orienting towards growth. But for anyone who does want that for themselves, I think it's more important for us to remember the adage, what got me here won't get me there. And to remember that the things that I've needed to master in order to get to this role, some of those I will need to unlearn in order to move to the next direction. So a lot of senior leaders that I'm working with, they needed to execute. At a certain stage, you will need to get better at creating clarity, creating those constraints, creating the guardrails of success for others, asking questions rather than having answers. And that is not only is a mindset shift, there are different skills required. And most people are just doubling down on what they've known. And they're most of the time getting in their own way.
Wow. Powerful, powerful stuff. What I heard in what you're saying. So I am that resonated with me a lot. So execute. Here's the answer tonight. This is how we get this stuff done. But what I heard in what you're saying is at some point, you've got to learn some different skills and unlearn some of that. How do I delegate better? How do I get more clarity? How do I do more people development? How do I develop myself as well as others and bring them up the ladder as well? So yeah, there's no way I could love your answer more.
Oh, wow.
Great thoughts to ponder. Lots to ponder there. Miriam, we're going to shift gears here in just a moment. I'm going to ask you a fun question that I love asking all guests, because we work to live, not live to work, right?
That's right.
But before I do that, I want to ask you, because you're also being very humble on this podcast. And so I want to ask you, like, what kind of campaigns are you running? How are you really serving your clients? Or like, who are I know you're not going to call out clients, but what are the types of people that you're working with these days, in the most current times? Would you be willing to share a little bit of that? Let's just unabashedly rave about yourself, if you would, please.
Oh, wow. Okay. How I start this won't be the rave, but I promise I'll be honest, but by the time I'm done here. So right now, it's the year 2023, which honestly, sometimes I forget, how did we get here? But we're here. It's year 2023. And I'm working with a variety of companies. I often am working with people in the tech space. So fintech, health tech, you name it. I do work across industries, but those are some markets that have changed overnight. So 2020, I'd never been busier. 2023, I don't know if I've ever been busier, because transformation is happening. It's necessary. It's being forced. And so there's companies who are being intentional about it, and they're reaching out to see how can they do this well, effectively, consciously. Most companies are asking really difficult questions about resourcing and human resourcing and financial resourcing. And so they need honest thought partnership. And the people that I most love working with, they're calling me and they're saying, I need a reality check. Here's the call I'm about to make. I need to make sure this isn't counter to what I stand for. And I need to make sure that I'm also not setting myself up for a hurdle 3, 6, 9 months from now. So can you help me make sure that I'm orienting towards this in the right way? And usually if someone has the wherewithal to call and ask, most of the time they're thinking about it right. I'd say 1 in 4 times they're missing something. They have a blind spot, and that's part of what I'm there for, to help them with. So those are the kinds of things I'm filling my days with. I love it. Definitely feel like I'm doing the work I was born to do. But if you want me to rave, I will. I will. I love working with people. Like I said, in high growth companies, I've worked with over 12 that exceeded the $1 billion valuation mark, some the $20 billion valuation mark, some through, I think I mentioned acquisition, IPO, ups and downs. And having seen that, I would say there's no right way and there's no wrong way to do it. It's really about doing right by yourself, by staying true to you.
Yeah. I know I've said this a lot, but I love all that. That's great. And thanks for sharing. And I love your illustration there about what, how you're helping people and who, because that's what people can resonate with, right? So if you're putting yourself in that place, I'm going to encourage you to reach out to Miriam. But we'll belay that for just one moment. Miriam, we work to live and not live to work, right?
Yeah.
And so what is the most fun vacation you have ever had?
When I was 19, I moved so I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I started my college years in Wisconsin. And then junior year, I moved to Seville, Spain. And in that moment, I learned so much about myself. I had to recreate my personality inside a new language. I did not really speak much Spanish before going there, but I was at the University of Seville. So courses were taught in Spanish. So I was doing like the deep dive. And so it was like I got to rebuild myself in a new way. And so there's part of me that I can only access in Spain, and there's a part of me that I can only access in Spanish. And so my husband and I have been married 10 years. So the Seville days predated him by a lot, but I got to take him to Seville and he got to meet my friends, and we got to spend a few days just walking the city streets. And I rediscovered those pieces of me. And so being able to be there with the person who's the most important person in my life, and for him to get to know me better after all these years, and for me to get to be there with him was just very, very sweet and meaningful.
I love that. For many reasons. I lived there for 3 years.
Amazing.
Entiendo eso perfectamente. I love it.
Claro
I
que
totally
sí.
understand. And for you listening and watching, if you've never experienced Sevilla or Seville, I encourage you to do it. And so does Miriam. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful place.
It is.
I love that.
Yeah.
Miriam, for anybody that's listening and watching and they say, wow, this has been really fascinating, and I would really love to get in touch with Miriam and have a discussion or explore a website, or dive in a little bit, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Okay. I would say put a smile on your face, because this will help you remember the website, leaderswhosmile.com. Mostly because I find the most seasoned leaders can kind of giggle their way. Giggle might be not the right word, but they can just kind of take everything in stride. And I feel like that's what we all aspire to be. So regardless of where we are in our career path, I want us all to be leaders who smile. So leaderswhosmile.com, or just go to LinkedIn. My name is lots of M's and lots of vowels, but there aren't too many Miriam Meimas out there. So you can probably find me on LinkedIn.
I love that. And we'll have the links down below for you as well. Miriam, thank you so much. I really just celebrate you for not only your answers and what you brought to the table, but for taking a chunk out of your day to be here to serve in the way you do. And you did it with a smile on your face the entire time. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
This is Brad A. Milford with the Unlimited Business Wisdom Podcast, where leaders, seasoned entrepreneurs, and business owners share their wisdom. If you're looking for more on leadership, sales, marketing, or operations to drive team development, higher quality, and high-level sustainable profits, we encourage you to join the Built for Brilliance community on Facebook, or reach out to us about one of our mastermind groups, coaching or consulting, or even fractional COO services. You can reach us at buildbrilliance.net/contact. We thank you for listening, for sharing the show, and appreciate your rating and reviews, as this makes more shows possible. Thanks for joining us.